Hi there everyone. Before I start talking, I just wanted to thank you for taking some time out of your day to click on the video, and a big thank you to the now over 400 people that have watched the original overview video I had done now about 3 weeks ago. I wanted to make this as a follow-up, as in rewatching the video myself, I found that I had missed out on just a couple small pieces of information that I had forgotten to mention, just for the sake of time, or the fact that I forgot then and there, as well as talk a little bit about the trim and some of the pieces that I had found moving forward. So I'll go ahead and start underneath the hood. I hope to make this a shorter video and not another 27-minute video. I also fixed the hood. I don't have to set the phone down. I messed with the hood latch and I got it so that it pops up every time. So now that it's actually light outside, I have a lot better lighting to be able to show off the motor. Pretty cool about it that it was this vibrant orange paint color with this bright blue Chrysler engine. A very cool contrast, I'm sure, when it was new. And you can definitely see the job of the rattle can paint job. And they could have just left the engine bay alone, but they actually decided to open the hood and to try to spray white paint inside all of the engine bay. I had done a great deal of sanding as I did in the bed to try to expose a lot of that original orange paint. I did wet sand with 3000 grit sandpaper and then 5000 on these inner fender wells, as well as a little bit of the firewall. In some areas where I was reaching thinner paint and I was then exposing just the primer underneath, I decided to stop for the sake of not wanting to damage it any further. So again, this is a 360 two-barrel, a part of the LA series of Chrysler small block V8s. And you can really see the long tube headers that are on both sides. I did not do this to the truck. This was the previous owner was wanting to make it somewhat of a hot rod. I do have the original cast iron exhaust manifolds, and at some point we'll be sandblasting them and putting them back on. Again, some power steering, as well as power brake truck. There's the pump down there. It does have standard ignition. 72 is the first year for the electronic ignition, but as far as I see, the standard ignition, control module, and ballast resistor were on the firewall, and if you happen to get the electronic, it was moved over right underneath this hood hinge by the bulkhead for the wiring harness. So I could move it over and transition and upgrade to electronic, but because this is how it came and my pursuit to preserve originality, I will leave it as such. I understand that many people have difficulty with points and don't want to deal with them, so they'll move over to electronic ignition and move over from points to an electronic distributor. But for the sake of trying to keep it all pure as much as I can, I will keep it points. And I have not had any issues so far after properly gapping the points with dwell meter. When I talked about the fuse box in the original video, I talked about the fact that it was bypassed. You notice how just there's two solid heater hoses, the inlet and the outlet for the heater core. There is actually not that small H-shaped piece of pipe that connected both of them that was cable operated. And I have the cable over here. I just have to get the piece. I actually have it ordered and it will be arriving shortly in the mail. But this little cable I have just put over here for the time being is the little wire operated cable that would have opened and closed the heater that goes through the dash and up underneath to the bottom side of the slider and the AC controls. Pretty interesting how it was a physical metal cable and not a little electronic door. But for the time being, I've just had it here and I won't mess with it until I get the piece in the mail, so that'll be something I'll have to add soon. Another thing to talk about is it has the incorrect, for this truck, windshield washer fluid container. It was a smaller one that still sat in this location. This one is actually out of, I believe, a 98 through 01 or 02 Ford truck. And because of how cheap it was, I decided to just buy another one of these for the time being. And whoever did the wiring had actually spliced up the windshield wiper fluid squirters in the cowl to this, and it actually works. So if I can go ahead and just show you the small little nozzles. And there's one on the other side as well, but they do work. I will go ahead and get the correct jug in the future. This one works for the time being. And I did find reproductions of the jug, and they're between $85 and $125. For a plastic jug, I don't feel like spending that much money on that at the moment. So another thing to mention too that I had forgot to talk about when I mentioned the taillights, which you can now more visibly see given that it's day, is I actually had to splice in a brand new taillight housing for this passenger side here. One of the interesting things that I had found out about it, which I hadn't seen and I haven't heard anybody talk about, it was more so finding out just because I had to have it done, was as if I take off this housing, there's 3 bulbs. There's the upper reverse light, the center brake light, and then this side marker light here. But not every single truck that I came across when looking for a taillight housing had all 3. Now, you did get a reverse as well as that center brake light, but not every single one of the housings has this little cornering light. I've only ever seen this on the SE, but I had never ever read anywhere in any of the brochures or information packets or even the owner's manual that with the SE you got this, and it was not included on other trucks. So I found one truck at the local junkyard that happened to have it, and it did have a decent enough housing to be able to splice in, as I had a reverse light out. So I was able to put that in, and the reverse lights both work now. Just a little odd piece that I would have really only known about, and I wouldn't have known about had I not had to go through that. So I do have, if you look at the inside of the fender, I do have the splash guards, as well as I don't believe that this truck has the overflow jug. It does have one on it, but it's aftermarket, and because it didn't necessarily come with the overflow jug from the factory, to my knowledge, it would have had an upper shroud, and that's where these holes come in. It would have had the same push-style retainers as the splash guards done by the frame, and it would have covered the upper radiator, almost a trapezoid shape, to only block the air from going straight to the radiator and not up and over. So, as far as trim goes, I did actually happen to find majority of the pieces of trim, and I did actually redo the holes on the fender. These are the original holes. These have not been drilled out. These were actually filled in with Bondo, and I was able to take a push pin from the back side and push it out to find out where the hole was. The trim was held on extremely awkwardly, to say the least, given the fact that almost every single piece, if not maybe 2 pieces at a time, are held in with very different styles of clips or metal retainers. I'll go ahead and talk about that a little bit, but one thing to note is this side only was actually filled in with Bondo body filler. The other side was actually spot welded. Excuse the plane going overhead. We're in the flight path for the local airport. So I will have to take off the inner fender well and re-drill those out, whereas with this side I was able to use a push pin. So I'll go ahead and actually show you. I did bring with me one of the pieces of trim just to talk a little bit about it. Here it is, and this would be for the front driver's side fender. This is that first piece. You can notice how it's the wider style. There was a thinner style for the base Adventurer. If you had gotten the Adventurer Sport, it would have been the same style, this wider style, but it would have had almost a reflective cream colored material or inlay in it, whereas this one, as faded as it is, because of the age, would have had wood grain, the same wood grain that's on the dash. And so each of these pieces is really, really solid. You'd have to do a lot to try to damage them. And the pieces that I happen to come across are all in extremely good condition. And you can see where this piece is actually snipped up underneath another, that the wood grain sticker that's on there is still intact. So that's what it would have looked like all the way throughout. Now what's odd is these front fenders are the only pieces that are held in with these really cheap style fast nuts. Everything else is held in with a different style metal or plastic clip. And even some of the areas on the truck that I'm trying to redo and to try to re-expose some of the holes to fit the plastic clips for the trim, I have not seen an example and therefore still do not know exactly how it was supposed to be put on. So I still have some research to do there. But I do have majority of it, including the tailgate trim. My goal with it, and I would like to make a video talking about the documentation of restoring these pieces. I recommend using Quad Zero steel wool that you can buy at the hardware store. Walmart, Ace, Home Depot, Lowe's. Quad Zero, 4 zeros. If you use anything less, it'll be too abrasive and it will scratch and damage the metal and chrome. Notice that this is a solid chrome piece. This is chrome plated. I do not recommend using the Quad Zero steel wool on anodized pieces, say the front grille, or even this style of trim that's back here. This is anodized as well. So you can use the Quad Zero steel wool on pieces such as this where it's actually plated, but not the anodized. And as far as the inlay goes for the wood grain, I have an idea of what I want to do, and I think for the time being, until something else comes up, this is what I'm going to have to do. Detroit Muscle is a company that does aftermarket parts for a various number of vintage American auto vehicles, and they do actually sell a reproduction of the tailgate inlay wood grain sticker, but they have it labeled underneath as for a Trail Duster, which was Plymouth's version of the Bronco, and the Ram Charger, Dodge's version. So with the sticker being itself a large piece that takes up the insert for the tailgate, I figured what I would do is buy a couple of them and actually use those to then place over the pieces of trim and to use a razor blade to cut them out. My reasoning for this is I could spend the time to look for different pieces of wood grain, different trim, but there's so many different types of wood grain tape that I want all of the wood grain to be the same. So if I buy multiples of the sticker and use that to redo the trim, all of the wood grain would be the same grain and shade of brown. So that's what I'm going to have to do. But I will just do a quick walk around of the truck again in the daylight so you can see it just a little bit better. Now, even though it's daytime, it looks a lot better over camera than it does in real life, but I'll go ahead and take that to my advantage. Door panels. Just another overall of the engine bay. Like I said, I really do think that when it was brand new, it would have looked very, very cool to see that bright blue, almost turquoise teal colored engine sitting in that very vibrant orange engine bay. One thing to note too about the Mopars that I always liked was the fact that you did get a painted engine bay. Not that I have anything against the satin black that GM or Ford offered, but it just looks a lot cleaner and it looks better in my opinion. So I do have the holes exposed on this side. I will have to drill them out on the passenger. Shot of the interior. I'll go ahead and show you the gauges. So I think if I do get a request in the future, I can talk about how I cleaned this. I did and have taken the entire gauge cluster out multiple times to redo some of the lights and the wiring, as well as clean the face of the gauge and the products that I used to do that, as well as to polish the gauge bezel plastic just to make it look as clean as it could be for what it is. You got the sticker there that says caution, do not drive with cargo light on, the AC controls and the AM radio, and then also underneath, I didn't show it for the sake of the lighting at the time, but the auxiliary fuel tank switch. I do not have the auxiliary, unfortunately, but the switch is still there, and all of the wiring, as far as I can see underneath the truck, all that would need it is the pickup and the tank itself with the metal straps that secure it to the frame, and I'd be in business. So the dome light works. I don't mean to be silent during these times. I did do another video. If this is your first video that you're watching on the channel, I did do a 27-minute video that was more in depth of the truck, and that one was mainly the overview. So for this, I'll just be doing a walk around, maybe adding in a comment here or there. But for more clarification on certain pieces, I would definitely recommend watching the other video that I have posted to the channel. So again, I don't want to make it another 27-minute video. I will actually end it here. But this is what I have so far, that I have found majority of the trim pieces, and I will be going ahead and restoring them. If I do get a request in the future, I will make a small little mini-series on the process of restoring the individual pieces and answering any questions that you may or may not have about some of the products that I've used to clean and maintain, as well as to freshen up the interior underneath the hood, as well as the exterior of the vehicle. So, without wasting any more of your time, I wanted to thank you for taking some time to watch the video first and foremost, and to also thank you for even clicking on the video in the first place. Thank you so much. Take care.